Hello and welcome to this podcast series, Day in the Life of an Actuary, brought to you by the Monash Actuarial Student Society. Just a little disclaimer before we start. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers only and do not necessarily reflect the views of Monash University or our sponsor firms.
This episode is part of our podcast series where we'll be sitting down and having conversations with representatives from our sponsor firms to give you, our actuarial student members, insights on many important topics from university experience, internship, and graduate applications to the actuarial industry and work of an actuary.
My name is Damon Flicker and I'm the president of MAS 2020.
I'm Hazel, Media and Communications Officer of MAS, and today, for the third podcast episode, we are delighted to be joined by Young Tan and Vivian Dang from UniSuper.
So to start off, Young and Vivian, why don't you give us an introduction about yourselves for our student members who want to know more about you?
You go first?
I go first?
Yeah.
Sure. So my name is Yang and I'm an actuary working in superannuation field. So a bit of my professional background, I started as an actuarial analyst at Russell Investments back in 2011. So that's where I qualified my exams and working in the same field, we was working at the same time. So I spent about close to 5.5 years at Russell Investments. So my work was mainly to do with valuation of defined benefit funds and other superannuation consulting work. And in 2016, I joined UniSuper as a product actuary. That was when I qualified as an actuary after a number of years and a few failed exams. And so I've been with UniSuper since then. My current work at UniSuper is mainly to provide actuarial support to different business units, senior management and trustee board, and oversee the actuarial management of our defined benefit division, which is, I think, where most of our university employees are in.
And could you just clarify for us and our members, what is defined benefit and what is a defined benefit scheme and fund?
A defined benefit scheme is different from the superannuation that we know in Australia. So where it's a defined, that's what we call as a defined contribution. So we know that the employers actually contribute a fixed percentage of the salary into the fund. So you know what goes in, but you don't, and what you get at retirement is subject to the investment return experience during the lifetime. Whereas in the defined benefit fund, what you will get when you retire is based on usually a salary-based formula. So that is not usually linked to the investment experience. So it's employers' responsibility to make sure the fund is well funded so they can fund that benefit when you retire. So it's called defined benefit because the benefit is defined, but the contribution, the employer might have to contribute, the amount that the employers have to contribute are not known in advance, so it's based on the advice of an actuary. But with UniSuper, there's a bit of a distinction compared to other defined benefit funds because our contributions are actually fixed. But that's another conversation for
another time. We don't go into that.
Yeah.
From
thank you.
From a student point of view, one of the things is a defined benefit member is defined in the CIS Act right now, not the CIS regs. But like a defined benefit member in the CIS Act is defined by a member where the benefit has a component related to a fixed dollar amount or salary. So there's a strict legislation definition as well of what a defined benefit member is, as opposed to a normal accumulation member.
And most defined benefit funds exist before SG even come into existence. So a lot of the regulations that applies to SG is not necessarily applied directly to defined benefit fund. There need to be some interpretation sometimes.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
It's not easy to work with under the current environment.
Yes.
And Vivian, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I started at Russell Investments as well. So Russell, like Young said, it's more we were in the Actuarial team. So it's just traditional DD consulting type work. Was there for 7 years. Then I went to the Heron Partnership, which is more of a boutique superannuation consulting firm. So you're Monash, yeah. So like one of the guys that lectures at Melbourne University. So the Heron Partnership is similar to Russell in that it was consulting, but the Heron Partnership did more like general tender consulting as well. So in the news you see places like ChantWest and Super Ratings more often, which is what Heron does. I was there for 4 years, and the last 2 years I was at MLC Wealth, which is the wealth management offshoot of NAB, which is currently in the process of being sold off. So I was there for 2 years, and I joined on Monday at UniSuper. So UniSuper, I'm in the strategy team.
Yeah.
Not Actuarial, but in the strategy team. But we handle the strategy team owns the new SPS 515 obligation for APRA.
Wow, that's amazing.
So did you meet each other at Russell Investments by any chance, or did you only meet?
No, we used to sit next to each other.
So you used to be colleagues. Yeah, I think he was my manager at some point.
Yeah, at one point. I didn't do anything though, but yeah.
Yeah. So why did you apply to UniSuper, and like for Young you apply to Actuarial team, and Vivian you apply to strategy team in particular? Like how did you make these decisions?
For me it was, so at the time I just recently qualified, and UniSuper was actually one of my clients at Russell. So I already had a lot of dealings with UniSuper, and I'm well aware of how the benefit design works. So
you had inside knowledge.
I have inside knowledge into the position that I was applied to. And it was a good, because I was interested in how the fund works, not just from the actuarial side, but how things work, like product, technology, operations.
Yeah.
So that was the opportunity came out, so I just applied.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that you'll find as your career progresses is that a lot of the job opportunities that come up is pretty much based on who you know. So, I came into UniSuper because I can't remember if I asked you, Young, or you let me know, but Young was my internal referral to get into UniSuper. And obviously Young was already known as working on the actual consulting side when UniSuper hired him. So it was a pretty smooth progression. The other thing is that obviously, Young and I both worked, in the industry for a while. At Russell, we have a range of clients. I used to do tender consulting, so I used to, we will be helping to rate all the service providers. So I guess, from my perspective, having, worked with a lot of the different, providers across the industry, UniSuper's, was in my opinion always one of the ones which is, one of the better funds. So when an opportunity opened up, which opened up just now, it was a good time to move.
That's great. And so tell me, Young and Vivian, why did you choose actuarial science? What made you want to become an actuary?
I think you should answer that first. My story is a bit complicated.
It's a while ago. For me, the main basis was that I liked the fact that it was a combination of math, which obviously, as all of us, would be good. We are considered good at math, otherwise you wouldn't even survive in Actuarial. But it was the fact that it was a combination of using math, but also, you had to be able to explain complex things in a way to other, to your clients, other stakeholders. It's not just, like pure math work with that type of stuff. There's a practical application. And, depending what your role is, it's, an actuary is valued because, we can explain things in a way that other people can understand, if you're good at what you do. So I guess it was bringing together that balance of things, which is what attracted me to, that career path compared to other things.
That's great. And what about you, Young?
So actuarial study wasn't actually my first choice. So I actually did a aeronautical degree, engineering degree at RMIT as an international student. So I completed that degree, and I had trouble finding work because I wasn't a citizen of Australia at the time.
Yeah.
And most of the aerospace industry requires you to be a citizen in order to get the security clearance. So
we only have Boeing in Melbourne, right?
you only have Boeing, and most of the work are contracted by defense. So
yeah.
hence the requirement for security clearance.
Yeah.
So I was doing other job for a few years. I was a restaurant manager at some point, and then I decided I didn't know anything about business, and I see the similarity between actuarial studies and engineering. They are both mathematical based. So I think that was and then I look at the stats on employability and prestige. So that was, if I had to do something different, that's why I picked actuarial studies. I knew it wasn't going to be easy to get a job because the competition is quite hard. But I think I was just thinking that I should give it a go.
Yeah.
And because that was when I became a permanent resident of Australia, so I managed to get a Commonwealth supported place. So it's good to do that without having to get financial support from my parents.
And was it a blessing in disguise? Are you happy where you ended up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's more fortunate than I expected. Because at some point between my two degrees, I was a bit depressed for a while. Because not being able to find a job is quite hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually you deserve what you have worked for. Yeah.
Hard work pays off.
Yes.
And another story, I guess, is another lesson is you don't always end up doing what you study. I think that's true for actuaries as well. So even if you, at some point, I mean, from my experience with the people that I've met, many actuaries, they actually don't end up working as an actuary at some point of their career, and that's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah, like I'm in the strategy team now, so I actually don't have any. Like UniSuper is a big DB fund, but if I have any actuarial questions, I can actually go to Young to ask. So I don't need to be an actuary for my current role, but obviously it adds value.
Yeah. The ability to think analytically is quite useful for a lot of workplaces. So it's not restricted to the traditional actuarial employee.
Can you tell us what an average day is like for you to work at UniSuper?
An average day, for me, my responsibilities are quite varied, so there's not really a typical work day. Because I support for different business units, so it depends on the queries I receive and the work that I was asked to do. So I could be working on for a projects team today, and next day I get a question from the CEO asking for a random question, then ask me to do some analysis. So it's quite varied.
Yeah.
Although there are some aspect of regular work, so sort of like there's regular monitoring work to do. That's
how many projects
boring.
do you think you're juggling
at the moment?
Right now.
Usually it's around 4 to 5 at the same time.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Some people in the company actually they juggle more projects at the same time. Depends on. I think the more you know, the more you get to ask questions. You get to be the person that people ask questions. Then you end up with more responsibilities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you, Vivian?
I've only just joined, so I'm just in meetings all day long. It depends on the role, because my current role, in terms of one of the first things I'll be doing is 515. But the way SPS 515 works is that SPS 515 is like the overarching prudential requirement for a fund. So basically, I just need stuff from people like Young or some of the other teams, and then I put it together. So it depends on what team you're in. My current team is more of that oversight type area. Whereas Young is obviously like an actual key support type function. And obviously, in the consulting days will be different, because the consulting days it's all about, well, just which client project are we working on at a certain time, and that type of stuff. But that's the other thing that Young mentioned, which is what makes it very interesting. If you're working in a traditional actuarial consulting environment compared to working in internal, in a consulting environment, it's all about, which clients have given us work and we're working on those things. Whereas in internal, the lines are a lot more blurred, because, you're already there and it's internal. It's all about, I guess, making the relationships across the organization and, people knowing you and then coming to you for questions and that type of stuff. It's a lot less formal engagement compared to when it's, you're the external consultant and you're, doing an actual piece of work.
That's really, good advice and really true.
Yeah.
Because when you work in a consulting place, all you think about when they ask you a question is you need to draft the scope of work. You need
How much
to
can I build?
You need to record how many hours you actually work on a certain project. But this is the thing that we don't have to deal with internally.
Yeah, that's right. But then we get questions that we can't say no to because we're not charging, so we can't avoid it. Whereas in consulting, you just bump up the fee and you have to answer the question anymore.
And tell me, what's the workflow like? Is it pretty consistent, or do you get waves and patches? Do you bring work home with you?
For me, it comes in waves, definitely. So because of the pandemic, I actually get a lot of questions regarding what's going to happen to our asset under management, what's going to happen to our revenue, those sort of questions. So that's sort of the thing that someone with an analytical skill can answer.
Are you more busy or less busy now that we're in the pandemic?
For the first few weeks, I was really busy, so I actually had to work at night. But I'm starting to dial down and control my working hours, because when you're at home, the line between work and leisure is quite blurred. You wake up, switch on the computer, then you're on. You don't talk to your colleagues like in the office, and you don't get a coffee at 10 o'clock. I'm slowly adjusting to it. I try to switch on my computer at a certain time of the day. In terms of bringing work, usually I only do work at home if that work is urgent or if that work is of interest to me. Because sometimes you come across interesting work, but sometimes you come across boring work.
That makes sense. Comes with all jobs.
Yeah, Vivian works at home most of the time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, MLC, it comes in waves, but MLC is a much more complex organization than UniSuper. So I think the impact of the pandemic on, in MLC, I was working on the defined benefit obligations. So that's SPS 160. So I've been flat out since January pretty much. I'm actually it's a good time to change jobs because I can move away from some of that stuff. But it depends on both the organizational culture and also just what's happening. But one of the things that I was telling the guys when I was at MLC, when the crisis hit, it's this financial crisis. Well, the market has already kind of improved a lot, but back in March when things were going haywire, this was the first time in a good 10 years, 11 years.
GFC, yeah,
it's been a while. So there's a lot of guys. But even you weren't working. You weren't at Russell yet when the GFC happened.
When GFC happened, I was doing my actuarial degree first year.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get a lot of people, even like Young, who's like actuarial manager now, who didn't actually experience working with the last GFC. So yes, we were really busy, February, March, and my team was really busy in April. But at the same time, for those analysts, I think it was a really good learning experience to understand what happens when you work through a financial crisis. You need to be nimble. What do you need to think about? What do you need to try and get in front of? So things don't happen. And one of the things, because my little area was, I think, on the ball, so we found that because we were responding to things proactively, a couple of weeks later, APRA would start coming up with questions. So APRA was like, how are you allowing for these things? How are you allowing for this? It was very easy for our team because we could go back to APRA and say, we've already done that, and we already gave you an email 2 weeks ago to show that we've done that. So it's one of those things where, yes, it was a lot of work, but it gives you a chance to I think show that, as an actuary, or if you're managing a certain risk area, that you're on top of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's a really unique experience to work through, and it gives you a new perspective, I suppose, on the risks that are out there.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
What are some of the most exciting actuarial projects that you've worked on? So Young, you at UniSuper, and Vivian, you at MLC, or Russell.
Exciting actuarial projects.
Or any memorable clients or memorable projects?
Let me think.
Or ones where you learnt a lot, or had a challenge?
I think for me, it was the time. It started when I was back at Rasa Investment. So UniSuper wanted to create a new defined benefit product.
Mm.
So
that thing. Yeah.
So they wanted to try to create a product from scratch to address the issues they have with the existing product. So that was product development is quite interesting. That's something that you don't get to do. You rarely get to do as a actually working in the defined benefit fund these days, because most funds are closed and no companies are interested in offering a defined benefit product. So that was really good.
Mm.
And I managed to work with the product side of UniSuper and then get to know a lot of people in the process.
And how did it go? Have UniSuper now launched that product?
No, unfortunately. That product was canned 2 years after I joined UniSuper.
Mm.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
Yeah, that was a very complex design. I remember
It's a great learning opportunity.
I'm
one
sure
of the
there's a lot of complexities that go into product design.
Well, particularly that one. The thing that makes UniSuper unique is not only UniSuper itself is already unique. The other things, if you guys didn't realize, is that the CEO is an actuary. So Kevin O'Sullivan, who's the CEO, he used to be with us at Russell Investments, and he used to be the actuary to UniSuper. And then when the previous long-standing CEO resigned, Kevin came over and became the CEO. So he went straight from being the actuary to the CEO, which is not usual. But that's Kevin for you. But UniSuper is very unique in that obviously it's already a very big DB fund and complex. In that actuarial side, just normal, and you have an actuary as a CEO, and you have 3 actuaries on the board of directors.
Yeah, and being a multi-employer fund is quite complicated as well, because most DB fund, like corporate DB fund in Australia, are owned by, they're set up by one single company, whereas at UniSuper, the trustee board consists of different representatives from different universities, and there's a consultative committee, which consists of more than 100 members. They are representative from all different universities. So any changes to the trust deed needs to be approved by the consultative committee, which is a really complex process.
I'm sure with 100 opinions, very complex.
Yeah, I think depending on particularly the super industry, as it changes over time, it gets more compressed with mergers. Every fund is quite different. You're coming from a different cultural background. You're coming from a different philosophy about which members you're trying to serve and how you're trying to serve them and stuff like that. So you can't generalize too much. Obviously, you get the whole difference between retail providers and industry providers, which is was brought to light in the Royal Commission. But even amongst industry funds itself, you can see quite different cultural values, or how they want to run their product. The fee structures, even for a pure acute member in an industry fund, can be different at Australian Super, which tends to have a slightly higher admin fee, compared to other funds which might have a lower admin fee and a higher investment management margin. So even for things which you might look simple at face value, there's still a lot of underlying differences. So depending on where you're trying to get a job, or you're consulting to these places, you need to understand where they're coming from and why.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds really challenging, but I guess you did really well in those projects. Yeah. So
it stopped. It didn't finish.
But
didn't do
I think you're
anything.
performing well.
So the design was actually finalized. It's the implementation that was proved to be a challenge.
The design doesn't work if you can't implement it. So you can't say the design's finalized.
Implementation is different opinions from within different parts of the company.
I'm sure.
So what are the exciting projects that you worked on, Vivian?
Most of the really exciting ones are probably confidential, so I can't actually mention it. But those couple of those. But I think in general, for working in a super environment, the biggest ones that I worked on probably SFTs. We had a couple. Well, I've done a couple of SFTs over the time in different aspects of it as well. But when you're doing an SFT, like it's just a huge project. There's always different aspects. And the interesting one is
SFT, sorry?
So an SFT is when you move a whole super fund to another super fund automatically. So when you're trying to move members from one fund to another fund, the easiest way is member consent. So the member just signs a letter, and then it's like the member doing like a normal rollover form, and you move from, it's like if you as a member tried to do that. So one way to do it is you do a bulk member consent. So the employee tries to get as many members to sign a letter as possible, and you just move them in one hit. SFT is different. SFT is when the trustees sit down and agree that it's in the members' best interest to move, and you just move everyone automatically. So the members don't need to do anything. There's no paperwork. They're trying to line up, the admin systems. Trying to line up the investments is a very big issue. They're getting a lot better at it now compared to when I was first in the industry. But like you're trying to move the money from one to another. So that's where it's not Actuarial, but the investment transition teams are very valuable. Like how do you move money on one day without having loss? You don't want leakage from the system.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's so many different aspects. Obviously, the legal and things like that. It's very complicated just because you're trying to do everything at the same time. So it tends to be very big projects. And you're talking about, if you're doing an SFT, we're talking about over half $500 million fund size. Less than that, you just do a member consent. So like I've seen like worked on 2 bill, 1 bill. I think there was another 1.5 bill type one that we had at one point. So it's very, very big, very complex.
Yeah.
So do you feel stressful when you have to deal with a big amount of money like that?
It's the good thing is normally the actuarial involvement is a bit to the side. So while we have involvement in everything, I'm not the one that's accountable for that. In terms of the leakage, normally that's the investment transition team. And for them, they move, billions of dollars every day. So like for them, they think about losing 1 basis point and they get upset. So the bigger amount of money is normally not too hard. And if anything, the bigger it is, the more you have to move in specie rather than having to sell for cash and then rebuy. So it's actually easier for them, I think. Because when you go for cash, then they have to add derivative overlays on top to try and stop the leakage. So it actually gets more complex for them. But it's definitely one of those things that's really hard. So I've seen project managers get really stressed before these things because they're the ones trying to keep track of everything. I've heard of issues with like, tax, for example, they moved members and they didn't get the tax rights. All of a sudden they had a tax problem. So there's just so many different aspects that if you're the project manager for it, then yeah, it's very stressful.
Yeah, so it's really challenging. So what are the tools and technical skills you have had to use for your job?
Tools. I think we only use Excel for me.
Yes,
Excel and VBA sometimes.
Yeah, you'll find that the longer you work, like the better you get at Excel, the easier it is. Because we spend most of our day on Excel. But as you get more senior, like in my team, it's probably more PowerPoint than Excel because it's a strategy team.
Yeah.
And depending on what role you're in as well, a lot of the newer roles, like, we're spending more and more time on data visualization software. So at MLC, the guys were spending a lot more time on Tableau. I think at UniSuper, it's more Power BI. Yeah.
Because it's part of the Microsoft Office.
Yeah, the suite. Yeah. So same thing though, like
yeah.
It hasn't got a lot of traction, I think, across the industry yet, but that's the way it's moving where, rather than just doing stuff in Excel, you're expected to be able to manipulate the data and have, pretty output using a visualization software.
Yeah.
We do. Oh, you go.
Sorry. I know that our investment team actually use R. They used to use MATLAB at some point, but then they switched to R because it's free.
Yeah.
So that's being used by our investment team as well. It's not just for academy.
Yeah.
We do a fair bit of programming at university, a lot of R, a little bit of MATLAB. Yeah, do you use those much in your day-to-day jobs, or is it more Excel and PowerPoint?
I think it would depend on the area of work that you work in and the companies you work in. So I think if you're working in a general insurer company, you may have more chance to use those programming language, especially if you're trying to get into the data science area. But for superannuation fund and consulting, I think it's mainly either Excel or their internal proprietary software.
Yeah.
And the other thing is important to note that yes, superannuation actuarial work is actually very different to the other actuarial areas. Our stuff is, compared to the other actuarial area, is much less technical. Like we don't deal with statistics much in superannuation because we don't. For a traditional DB work, you don't really care about statistics. You're talking about like a 50-member DB plan. You don't need to analyze it. It doesn't matter. So our stuff is purely focused on just the future projections. Whereas if you're like in life insurance or GI, it's a very different type of work and thinking. And obviously you have capital requirements and things like that. So then they tend to use a lot more software packages.
Right, that makes sense.
So
you go, Hazel.
Yeah, so what about the soft skills that you have used? What are the soft skills which are like helpful for you to do your job?
Yeah, so for superannuation, the soft skills are, I mean, depending if you're consulting now, but the soft skills are probably much higher, like weighting to your like overall requirement compared to say you're like an internal reserving team in an insurance company. And obviously Young and I both came from the consulting side. So, the whole soft skills, so, like writing, presenting to clients, we did all that training when we were at Russell. But, you're coming through the consulting side, it's all about, it's not just doing the work, but, how do you communicate that to the client? How do you make sure you understand what it is that the client wants and present it in a way that makes sense for them? Are you properly allowing for, what they're looking for? Those things are, the same amount of importance as just getting the number right. Like if you get the number right, but you haven't done anything else, then the client's not going to pay you. So it's, very important for our work. But it's one of the things where, the people that we worked for and who trained us, like, it's across the industry there's a lot of really good experience. Superannuation actuaries, who act as mentors, for us as we're coming in our careers and things like that. And obviously UniSuper, our former boss is now the CEO. So you can see how, they've progressed their career. So it's definitely very important, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you just kind of pick it up as you work because there's lots of people above you who you can learn from.
Yeah. I think at some point in the career, the technical skill is just a given. So you're expected to get your numbers right anyway. So the rest is what you should focus on developing.
Yeah.
And how would you recommend that students who want to become actuaries at UniSuper or in general go about developing these skills and acquiring these skills?
Well, I think casual work is good. So if you have to work in a team for your part-time employment, that's a good place rather than starting full-time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff is just, particularly in the early years, it's just can you work in a team and, get a lot of people, if we give you 10 things to do at the same time, can you manage those things and, work independently and be responsible for your work and be accountable? All those type of things transfer over from, other jobs or, other leadership activities or, volunteering activities, can you show initiative, that type of stuff. So,
and in terms of ability to communicate, I think you can always test with your family who have no actual background to try to explain the actual concept. I think that's a good place to start, but not too often, I guess, because they'll get sick of it. Yeah, if you can't explain something simple enough for a non-technical person, that sometimes means you haven't actually understand the subject yourself well enough.
Yeah, I don't know how we practice our communication skills. Like I just practice on the clients really, but
so you can use a family as a test. I used to test it with my my girlfriend, my parents-in-law, sometimes occasionally.
I don't think I ever used my family.
It's quite challenging.
Maybe I'll try it out at dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Try to start with the smaller audience. It's easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
That's
bad
a fun
enough thinking.
idea.
It's bad enough thinking about actuarial work during the day though. Like I don't want to talk about it with my family at dinner time.
It's a
It
very
doesn't have
good idea.
pure technical actual issue. It can be a superannuation topic or just anything that
Yeah.
people have some vague idea of. I don't know what's really going on.
Yeah.
The other thing there is that, and probably even more important than your delivery, but to communicate well or to consult well to a client, the most important thing is that you first understand how the other person receives a message. So it's not just working on your own, I guess, thought process or delivery. It's also working on your ability to, understand the other person, and that's one of the trainings that you would, if you, depending where you're working, the firm will probably normally provide this type of training as you get more experience anyway. But Young and I, for example, are both more on the analytical bit. So if you're trying to persuade us of something, you have to give us the data.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're working with, say, like a sales team, pretty much everyone I've met in the sales team does not really care about the data. They're more the what's it called? That other box? I think it's expressive. They're called the expressive box generally. So with those people who are the polar opposites of where I normally sit, it's all about the story. It's all about how it affects them. So you would do the message in a completely different way. You would appeal to their emotions a lot more.
Yeah.
So that aspect is probably is very important, because otherwise the other person's not going to receive your message anyway. So I guess in terms of practicing, I guess it's with your family or just with your friends and or even your lecturers, it's just thinking, well, how does this person like to receive information? How do they think? And then if you have the same message you're trying to communicate, how do you communicate that in different ways so that it fits into other people's thought processes?
Yeah. Some people just want the end result. The sequencing is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could convey the same message to two different people in two completely different ways, I suppose.
Yeah. So you can do your own only the exercise by categorizing people that you know of into different categories.
Yeah. Yeah. Young, I suppose this question is more directed towards you, as you've worked at UniSuper a little bit longer. Can you tell us what the work culture is like at UniSuper?
Culture is actually pretty good because we are a non-profit fund. So we really do work with our members' best interests at heart. Most people try to do the right thing most of the time. And we are not that, as a culturally, I think that's, and in terms of family friendly and workplace friendly, it's quite flexible. So I used to work in Melbourne because my wife had to relocate to Sydney for a new job. And then I was able to convince my manager to get me working remotely in Sydney. So they're quite flexible with these sort of things.
That's good. That's good.
And during the COVID crisis, they are quite supportive as well. So the company actually offers standby leave for everyone who needs it. So like people with kids, if they need to spend time with kids at home. So I think you can apply for up to 20% of your hours as standby leave.
That's important, especially around this time with, crazy coronavirus. I'm sure that's very needed for a lot of staff and people working at UniSuper.
Yeah.
Did UniSuper give you much support in terms of, taking your exams, your actuarial exams, or did you, I suppose you completed them before you came over to UniSuper?
Yes, because UniSuper doesn't actually employ actuarial graduate, so we are not a traditional life company or consulting firm. So most of the positions are more for experience, actually.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Does UniSuper even have a study policy? You probably wouldn't, right? I
think if you work in the advice area, you would. So it depends. It's business related. So if you are working in the investment team, maybe they'll support you to study your CFA qualification. It's business unit oriented.
Yeah.
So there's no actuarial team within UniSuper. I'm the only actuary.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the only actuary.
You are the actuarial team of
I'm the
UniSuper.
actuarial team. Yeah, that's right.
Most of the firms have pretty similar study policies, so some a bit more generous than the other ones. But one of the things I always find is that at the same time, it doesn't necessarily matter what the study policy is. It depends how busy you are. And also depends what you want out of your career. Like, you could choose to, I say, take all your study leave. But at the same time, that's, depending on how busy you are, that can be a lot of days of leave. Particularly if you're really busy at work right now, as most people should be, because it's the middle of a pandemic. It's kind of one of those things where at the same time as taking leave, you actually do need to think about, well, what are your career development aspirations as well? And trying to balance it off. So it's really up to, I think, each individual to balance off, what it is they're trying to do at the same time. Yes, we still want you to pass, but at the same time, as an individual, you need to be thinking about, what projects do you want to be working on? What do you want to be putting your hand up for different challenges, and making sure you still, progress your career at the same time. There's no point, studying really hard, but then, slacking off a little bit on your work, getting to the end of, 4 years. It's kind of like you're qualified, but do we trust you to sign anything? It's like, probably not.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's really good advice.
Yeah. So some employers have highlighted knowledge about the industry as something that university students often lack when applying for graduate roles. So do you have any advice on this for actuarial students wanting to improve their industry knowledge?
You really just need to read the financial press, and then for things which are a bit bigger, like, productivity commission, Royal Commission, those one-off things, you can go off and read in more detail if you want to. But like, as long as you read the AFR every day, and also, and in terms of the other ones, like, you can choose which you want. Like, I know some people like Financial Standard, but I find those ads a bit annoying. Like, I don't know, like, I normally don't read any of those ones. I don't know if you do, Young. I just do AFR, and that's good enough for me. But there's lots of like cufflinks you should subscribe to. That's not too bad.
No, it's First Link now.
Oh, that's right. They changed their name because they got bought. Was it Lonsec that bought a partial share of that?
Morningstar.
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 Yeah. So First Link's whatever they're called. So that was set up by Chris Cuff, who used to be chair of UniSuper. But that one's not bad as a little newsletter email that we get weekly, probably. But otherwise, like, if you read the AFR every day and you understand the main articles of what's happening in the industry, that gives you a pretty good base. And that's what most people do. So if you're talking to anyone during an interview and they're asking you questions, that's all they're going to know anyway, so that's fine.
I mean, internet is pretty useful these days. It depends on what your interest lies. So if you want to find out more about anything, you can always Google.
Yeah. Google is a master to me.
Yeah. And what do you do if you're reading it and you don't really understand what's going on, especially as a university student who doesn't have that much experience or context? How would you go about trying to understand, something that you read in the paper?
Usually, if there's anything I don't know, I usually start with Wikipedia, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that's why the earlier you start, the better.
Because
I
they
started
are
reading
technical terms.
Yeah, they can be hard to pick up. You read AFR every day, and then you start to pick up the amount that you don't understand will lessen over time.
Yeah.
There's obviously a couple of historical books that you should read as well, just for background in terms of like investment markets. But there's all like the famous ones, like there's the Enron run, there's the long-term capital markets one when Genius failed. The investment banking ones, which don't really apply to Actuarial, but they're interesting to think about how markets work, and they're just funny. You get the really old ones there as well. So I think if you just read widely and do AFI every day, then you'll pick up the jargon. It's pretty simplistic, really, over time. And then it depends where you went into work. Like for Super, the issue at the more complex level, which you won't get by just reading everything, is more understanding the subtleties of the different industries and what's going on in the background. Because obviously when people put out media statements, they're not actually saying what's happening really. And then that's when you get to that level, then I think it's really relying on mentors who are experienced in the industry that you're interested in and asking them for what's happening. That's a while away.
And so, as employees in the superannuation industry, do you read in depth more about superannuation things, and where do you go to source that kind of material?
Yeah, so for us, it's probably like mainly AFR, or I mean, we get media links at work as well. But the good thing about the super industry, though, I guess, is relatively like same. So in terms of developments that happen, there's not much, so it's pretty easy to keep on top of it. Yeah, so like everyone kind of knows what everyone else is doing anyway, so it's pretty simple.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, there are professional bodies within UniSuper. There are many different professional bodies and peak bodies within UniSuper, so they are usually a good source of information for non-technical person as well.
What are some of the exciting changes that are happening right now in the workplace of an actuary that you've noticed?
Exciting changes.
I think for superannuation, it's one of the things where, me and Young don't work in insurance. There's probably lots of stuff going on there, but I think in super, I think the good thing is it's been happening slowly for a while as well. But I think there's a bit more acceptance and just growing value of actuaries in non-actuarial roles. Obviously, historically, actuaries were pretty much just working on DB. But I think you're getting more and more of us who have branched out into different places. Obviously, I'm in the strategy team. Young is an internal actuary. So the actuary, the formal actuary to UniSuper is still at Willis Towers Watson. But then they see enough value to hire Young as an internal product actuary. And in my old team at MLC, like that wasn't traditional actuarial work. There was a team of actuaries. And like there was a job ad this morning for First State Super for an internal actuary. And I think their new general manager for investments comes from an actuarial background as well. So, hopefully that trend continues. But I think, the good thing is that there's, I might just be optimistic, but, there seems to be a growing trend of, actuaries being able to branch out into other roles across superannuation, as the industry gets, the funds get bigger, and, there's more value you can add having, some internal stuff. And obviously data analytics as well. If you're coming in as an internal actuary, you're expected to be able to, I guess provide some insights into there and be able to manipulate data and give insights to senior management and that type of stuff. So there is, growing awareness for our skill set.
Yeah, I think the opportunities are quite big. It depends on whether you like the technical side of things or you like the communication side of things. If you're really interested into machine learning, there are skills that you can pick up that it's going to be more relevant in the workplace more and more. But I think the value that actually provides the step between the analysis and communication. So what does all this data mean at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It's not easy to demonstrate that value as well. But then you see if you can demonstrate it, you get UniSuper where, the CEO is an actuary and 3 of our directors are actuaries. So obviously, they came from an actual background, but they've managed to progress their careers all the way to, senior management, by demonstrating what Young said, that ability to, communicate that gap.
Yeah, sounds cool.
All right. Hazel, do you want to fire away?
Okay, so lastly, do you have any valuable advice you wish to pass to our student members on making the most of their time at uni and transitioning into the workplace? Or maybe personal advice.
Well, I guess it's, for me, the advice I'll give is to try to know more than just the actuarial stuff. So, because what separates you from other actuary students is not the technical skill, it's and everything else essentially. If you know a bit more about anything else, that sets you apart.
What kind of things fall into the anything else that you look for in like a potential actuary graduate?
So communication, if you are a better communicator than other actuarial students, then that sets you apart. Then you can do well in the interview, then there's more chance to get a job.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's all the context. And this is where it comes into reading the AFR. But if I ask you a question of what's happening in the industry, then it will be the students to understand what's actually the context and what's happening, compared to the students who'd be like, I don't know. Like, you want to hire someone that might be technically good but doesn't actually have any interest or any knowledge of what's happening in the actual industry.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yes, really good advice. So that's it for today's questions. So really thank you, Vivian and Young, for the interesting conversation we just had, especially during a busy time like this. And thank you to our audience for listening. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode and were able to learn from the value advice from Young and Vivian just shared. We personally learned a lot from your story as well. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Yeah. Just a really big thank you to you guys. We learned a lot about, communication and context, as well as, traditional actuarial stuff. So I'm sure our student members will find a lot of value in the advice and stories that you've shared. So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you around at a future event. But in the meantime, take care.
Good luck with your studies.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.